Ever feel like you're trying to decode something hidden in, just everyday conversations?
Yeah.
Like there's this subtle current shaping why people do things. You want to get a handle on it, but without getting totally bogged down in jargon.
Yeah, absolutely. That's pretty much the puzzle we're looking at today.
Right. So we're doing a deep dive into these hidden power dynamics that influence our relationships. We're pulling from some pretty interesting philosophical ideas.
Exactly. We've dug into some really compelling sources looking at how people navigate influence and the sort of bedrock principles that seem to be operating underneath it all.
Think of it like getting, I don't know, sharper glasses to see what's really going on around you.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
And our mission here is pretty straightforward.
Right.
We want to give you a clear view of these often invisible forces,
Right.
help you navigate them more effectively and, crucially, in a way that feels, well, authentic to you. Okay, so where do we even start unpacking all this? It feels huge.
Well, I think a really fundamental starting point is just recognizing that power isn't some abstract concept just for boardrooms or politics.
Okay.
Robert Greene put it really well. He said, power is a social game. And to really get it, you have to become a student of people. It reminds me of Balthazar Grecian, who pointed out something like, we spend ages studying rocks and plants. Imagine if we put that kind of effort into understanding people, considering how much our lives depend on navigating those interactions.
That makes so much sense. It's like
Okay.
everyone's playing this game, whether they admit it or not.
Exactly.
Even thinking back, like Lord Chesterfield talking about manners in courts centuries ago, he basically said without those careful interactions, it all just falls apart.
Right. It descends into chaos. And that highlights the constant kind of subtle maneuvering that's always happening.
Yeah.
And what's really fascinating, I think, is this idea of the supposed non-players.
Oh, yeah. Tell me about that.
These are the people who make a point of saying, oh, I'm not interested in power. Or they really emphasize their, moral qualities, their niceness, their selflessness. But Greene argues that these folks can actually be some of the most sophisticated manipulators. They use that very image of being above it all as a tool.
Huh. So, constantly highlighting how helpful they are could actually be a way to get people indebted or influence them indirectly.
It could be, yeah. It's that appearance of rejecting power that becomes their source of power, in a way. You have to look closely at the actions, not just the words.
Makes you think, doesn't it? And the thing is, this isn't new. These kinds of dynamics, these power struggles, they've always been around.
Absolutely timeless.
Greene makes the point that maybe the punishments have changed. You're not getting beheaded anymore, but maybe you get summarily fired.
Right. The stakes feel different, but the game.
The underlying game is the same. Law 1 from the 48 laws of power, never outshine the master. That feels like something that applies just as much today as it did in some ancient court.
Totally. It resonates because the core human dynamics haven't fundamentally changed that much, which leads us nicely into thinking about how people actually engage in this game. Greene lays out this useful framework, these 3 types of players.
Okay, yeah, let's break that down. So first up, you have the deniers. And as Greene describes them, it's almost like they want to believe everyone's just purely good, purely altruistic. They don't really want to face the more complex, sometimes darker side of human motivation.
Right. And within that group, you've got people who are genuinely disturbed by power dynamics. They feel uncomfortable, maybe even anxious in situations where they feel like they have to play games, so they just try to avoid them altogether.
Okay, that seems understandable.
Okay.
But then there's another kind of denier.
Yeah. And this is where it gets tricky. These are the passive aggressors, or those supposed non-players we were just talking about.
Right.
They say they're not manipulating. They say they're not playing the game, but their actions. Well, their actions often tell a different story.
Right, so there's a mismatch.
Exactly. And that's why Greene calls them potentially the most slippery and dangerous of all, because you're dealing with that disconnect. It's hard to pin down.
Yeah, I can see that. Okay, so after the deniers, who's next?
Next up are the lovers, sometimes called the Machiavellians.
Okay, lovers of power.
Lovers of the game itself, yeah. These are the people who openly embrace the manipulation, sometimes even the aggression involved in seeking influence.
So like the stereotypical con artist or Maybe the really aggressive corporate climber.
Exactly, that kind of archetype, as Green describes it. They might get ahead quickly, make some short-term gains.
But there's always a but.
There's usually a but. Their lack of empathy, their difficulty building genuine trust and cooperation often means they hit a ceiling.
Oh.
They alienate people, they burn bridges, they can't really see beyond their own immediate goals, so collaboration breaks down.
Makes sense. They play a short game, maybe?
Often, yes. Which brings us to the third type, the radical realists.
Radical realists. Okay, what defines them?
This group basically accepts that the drive for influence, for power, is just a natural part of being human. It's woven into our psychology.
So they don't deny it exists, like the deniers.
Right. And they don't necessarily revel in the nasty parts of it, like the lovers. They just see it for what it is. They understand these dynamics are real.
And the advantage there is?
Well, the advantage is clarity. By understanding how these dynamics work, you're better equipped to protect yourself, to make informed decisions, and to navigate situations without being naive. As Green kind of suggests, it's better to understand why people do what they do, even the less savory stuff, than to operate under some idealized fantasy of human nature.
Okay, so that gives us a map of the different approaches people take to this whole power game. But, I mean, is it really all just about tactics and maneuvering? That sounds a bit bleak.
That's a great question. And no, it's definitely not the whole picture. This is where other perspectives, like Stoicism, offer a really important counterbalance.
Ah, the Stoics. Okay, how do they fit in?
Well, the Stoics really emphasize character over any kind of outward show. Musonius Rufus had this great line, something like, "Philosophy isn't about outward display, but about paying attention to what's needed and being mindful of it."
So less about pulling strings, more about who you are.
Exactly. From a Stoic view, real sustainable influence doesn't come from clever tricks. It comes from your integrity, your trustworthiness, your credibility, your inner character. That's seen as a much more solid and ultimately more powerful foundation.
That really shifts the focus inward, doesn't it? Instead of just looking at the external game, it's about building a strong internal core.
Precisely.
And it's interesting how that lines up with, well, basic ethical ideas that you see everywhere. You know, things like the Ten Commandments: don't kill, don't steal, don't bear false witness, honor your parents.
Right, those fundamental principles of how to treat others.
Yeah, they aren't just abstract rules. They're kind of like the instruction manual for building trust and making society work, right? They provide consistent criteria for making decisions.
Absolutely. And that consistency, that reliability in your behavior is what builds that character the Stoics talked about, which leads us to this really useful concept, ethical realism.
Ethical realism. Okay, tell me more.
It's about trying to blend the two things we've been talking about. Having a clear-eyed awareness of how power dynamics actually work in the real world.
The realism part.
Right. While also staying firmly committed to your own ethical principles. It's finding that balance, acknowledging the sometimes messy reality without throwing your values out the window.
I like that framing. I heard this analogy once. The pessimist sees only the bad, the optimist only the good.
But the realist sees things as they actually are and figures out how to deal with it.
Exactly. So ethical realism is like that, seeing the power dynamics, the potential for manipulation, the difficult stuff, but choosing to navigate it all with integrity, aiming for constructive outcomes rather than just winning at any cost.
Precisely. It's about trying to align your actions with your values. Like that quote, aiming to create a life that feels good on the inside, not just looks good on the outside.
Yeah, that resonates.
And there's a really practical long-term advantage here too. Another bit of wisdom we came across was better choices now means more choices later. Explain that a bit.
Well, if you consistently act ethically, build trust, treat people well, you open up more options for yourself down the road. People want to work with you, help you, support you. If you burn bridges and act unethically, your options tend to shrink over time. So good ethics isn't just morally right, it's often strategically smart in the long run.
That's a powerful point. Okay, so we've covered the landscape, the players, the ethical dimension. How do we actually use all this? What are the practical takeaways for navigating life?
Right. So what? Well, I think the first absolutely crucial step is developing that awareness of power dynamics. And this is key, without letting it make you cynical or constantly suspicious.
That sounds like a tricky balance. It is. It means working on your emotional intelligence, getting better at spotting potential manipulation or hidden agendas, but using that awareness for understanding, not for paranoia.
Okay, so recognize the game, but don't assume everyone's playing dirty.
Pretty much. And then, building on what we just discussed, consciously focus on developing your character.
Right, the stoic angle.
Yeah. Building trust, acting with integrity, see it not just as being nice, but as a strategic asset. It's fundamental for building influence that actually lasts. People want to align themselves with individuals they trust and respect.
That makes sense. What else?
Cultivating perspective is huge, too. Simple practices like, gratitude, just taking a moment to remember how fortunate you are to experience another day, as one source put it.
How does that help with power dynamics?
It helps keep things in balance. It prevents you from getting completely consumed by ambition or fear. Making decisions from a place of stability and perspective is usually much more effective than reacting impulsively.
Okay. And related to that, I imagine having a sense of purpose helps.
Definitely. Knowing what truly matters to you, what your larger goals are, acts like a compass. It helps you decide which battles are worth fighting, which games are worth playing, and when to just let things go. It guides your choices through those complex social landscapes.
Right. And one last practical point that came up was this distinction between work and passion.
Yeah, that was interesting. The idea that work is often stuff we feel we have to do, maybe don't enjoy, whereas passion is what we're genuinely drawn to, what energizes us.
And the connection to influence is.
The idea is that aligning more of your life, your energy, with your passion can actually be a really powerful, organic way to build influence. Your genuine enthusiasm is contagious. It attracts people, creates opportunities, often more effectively than forced networking or overt power plays.
So finding what you love and doing it well can be a form of influence in itself.
It seems so. So wrapping it all up, the big picture seems to be, look, we're all swimming in these currents of power dynamics. You can't really choose not to be in the water.
Right, you can't opt out.
But by understanding the currents, better understanding the different ways people swim, understanding the importance of your own characters, your buoyancy, you can learn to navigate more effectively, more consciously, and ultimately in a way that feels more authentic to who you are.
That's a really helpful synthesis, which I suppose leads us to a final thought for you, the listener. As you go about your week, maybe start noticing those subtle currents. What power dynamics might be playing out quietly in your workplace, maybe in your family, or even just among friends?
Yeah, just pay attention.
And then ask yourself, how could a clearer awareness of those dynamics, combined with a real focus on your own character, your own values, how might that change things? Could it lead to maybe more fulfilling interactions, better outcomes, a path that feels more?
Right. Is definitely something worth reflecting on.